Guys, welcome to our next presentation on SETAs and accreditation. And just before we can start with it, I think it's important that we start with a bit of a history before we can carry on with this. Now, previously they had something that they called the traditional educational system. Now, that worked on the point system or scoring system. For example, we have a lady called Zanele. She started working in a retail group. She done her training, and after about 3 or 4 days of training, she done a test. She got about 95% for her test. Very excited. The 5% that she lost was something about credit card transactions. Never mind, 95 is enough. And they've given Zanele a certificate. Next week, Monday, she went and dumped on the till. And Monday afternoon she was unfortunately short on the till. The reason why is because she don't really understand credit card transactions. Tuesday again, same story, short. Wednesday again, short. Come Friday, she lost the job. Why? Because every single day she's short on the till. Now, that was a typical example of the traditional educational system. That didn't work. So they started looking at the rest of the world, what they implemented. United States called something Common Core. The rest of the world got something that they called OBE, and that's where they copied the principles of OBE, also known as outcome-based education in South Africa. Now, there's two key legs that outcome-based education is based on. The first leg is that there is a theory component and also a practical component. For example, a lady, she goes to university, she's completing a course, and then she starts working in a company. Maybe it was a public administration diploma that she's done. She starts in a company and she's got no practical experience on how to do the filing or how it actually works in a company. So now there is a strong theory component and a practical component. Now, SAQA don't define the percentages, but Department of Labour, however, say that learnerships is based on a 30% theory and a 70% practical component. Others argue again there must be a clean split, at least 50% theory and a 50% practical component. But in order to achieve OBE, there must be at least a strong practical component. Say a minimum of 50, recommended 70%, either in the classroom or overall in the course. And the second leg of OBE is that it's based on competency. Now, in order to be competent, I need 100%. So if I think back about that story about Zanele, she missed 5%, only one question on credit card transactions. She wasn't competent. So therefore, I would say Zanele was not yet competent. In order to achieve a competency, I need to achieve all the things. Yes, I might sometimes overrule it and say, yes, the learner was nervous, but I feel that the learner can do it. But in order to achieve OBE certificate, you still need that competency, and a lot of people argues with it. Another example I can give you is, for like example, I'm driving a car. If I can't start the car, I'm not yet competent. So in the classroom is also going to be different, because in training the facilitator is going to train the learner on how to answer the questions. In order to get a competency certificate, you must answer all the questions. There's a set criteria of all the assessment criteria in the questions. You will be asked all of them. They can't pick. They will ask you everything, and you know what questions they're going to ask you. So it's actually quite easy to achieve 100% competency. We're looking in our school systems. They pick what questions they want to use. That's where they use in the percentage. OBE works different. I tell you what questions I'm going to ask you. You must prepare the answers for all of them. I'm going to ask you all of them, and you must answer all of them 100% to get the competency. Okay, so we already discussed OBE. OBE is a fantastic principle, and in order to implement OBE in South Africa, they had to create these things called SETAs. Now, SETA stands for SETA Education Training Authority. Note that education and training is two different things. Also, if we refer to Department of Higher Education and Training, is two different things, two different principles. Now, they named these SETAs funny things. Some they named W&R SETAs, other services SETA or EDP SETA. They started with 26 SETAs on the States. They dropped to 18 SETAs. They reopened. I think on the moment there's currently 21 SETAs active in South Africa. Now, in order to get these SETAs to work, they created also this body at the top called SAQA, South Africa Qualifications Authority. Now, SAQA makes all the policies and the rules and the regulations, and they also audit the SETAs. So the SETAs follow all the policies of SAQA at the top. They even went so far and they also created the SAQA Act. So there's some legal implications if they do not follow all these policies and the Act. And on the top left, we'll also see that we've got DHET, that's Department of Higher Education. Now, Department of Higher Education look over the SETAs, but they are following the policies of SAQA. A bit of a strange setup, if you guys will agree. So yes, Department of Higher Education is in charge at the top, but the SAQA on the other hand is making the policies. Now, in order to be accredited as a training provider, or employees must also belong to a SETA, you can only belong to one SETA. I'm going to explain this now a bit further. There is three typical types of accreditation. And I'm going to break it down in three categories to explain this. The first type of accreditation is what we call the person's accreditation. There's David at the top. David is an accredited trainer or an accredited assessor. He gets his own letter to say that he's been accredited as a person to train other people or to assess other people. You can also get accredited brokers and all kind of other stuff. So that David has got his own letter for accreditation. The second type of accreditation, or also another word that we can use as approval, is the actual program, a training program. That training program, if I go to the previous slide, had to go to any of these SETAs, whatever SETA is responsible for it. They looked at the program, they approved it, and they've given this program its own letter of approval or accreditation. Now that's that second type. And the third type is obviously the training provider on the other side, on the right hand side. That training provider, in order to become an accredited training provider, you first of all obviously need accredited people, like assessors and moderators. And the second thing that you're going to need is obviously a program that was approved by any of the SETAs. The third thing we're going to look there for is a quality management system, also known as a QMS system. Now, a quality management system is a collective word that we actually use to describe all the policies and procedures. How are you going to recruit your people? How are you going to do training? How are you going to assess? How are you going to invoice your people? Where are you going to file your stuff? That's all your QMS system, all your policies and procedures is grouped in there. And then lastly, we're going to obviously look at the resources. Obviously, you must have a training venue. You must have computers. You must have filing cabinets. So that's the third type of accreditation. So always remember, there's three different letters that you can get. The first one is to accredit you as a person, me as a person, that goes to my ID number. The next one is a training provider. The training program was approved by the relevant SETA. And then the third type of accreditation is a training provider. So if I'm looking at the training provider, I must look for if they accredited. If I'm looking at the course, then I must also look of the specific course that the training provider is offering is also accredited. Then I can also ask who is going to present that course, because that person must have his own letter of accreditation. Now, furthermore, when we also start with these programs, we also need to find out how difficult is the course and what is the duration of the course. Now, the difficulty, complexity of the course we determine with NQF levels. Now, previously we had 10 levels, they reduce it to 8. We can see there, level number 2 is typical your grade standard 8 to grade 10, 4 your matric level, 5 and 6 is our historical FET, previously also known as our technicons. And then 7 and 8 is higher education, that's your universities and stuff. Now, to explain that is, if I say NQF level 4, that the complexity of the course, numeracy and literacy is the same as what we have in matric. And the next slide is also going to help that. On the left hand side you see there's NQF levels going 1 to 8, and the bottom I have workplace experience, so experience working in this and maybe in the workplace or practical doing something. And if I'm looking here at the NQF level 4 slide, I see that also requires like a level 4 experience. So in other words, typical question I also always ask the learners, if you're going to enroll for a plumber's course, what NQF level would you enroll for a plumber's course? And most of the guys will say, on an NQF 4, NQF 5 level, I will enroll for a plumber's course. Now on this scale, this graph that I'm showing here, it also says that I need at least a level 4 or 5 experience in plumbing. So in order to enroll in the NQF 4 plumber's course, you should know the basics of plumbing. Installing a one-phase geyser in the ceiling, the pressure valve, the fittings, the connection up to the DB box. So if you don't have that, then I think you should rather start with an NQF 1 or NQF 2. Yes, you might have the numeracy and the literacy on the NQF 2, but you don't have the experience, so you will have to start at the bottom with plumbing. Maybe your subject expertise is in financial, yes, then you can go to a higher one, but if you don't have the experience, we also need to start at the bottom. And then my last, the favorite one that I love is credits. Now, if you always hear these words, credits, every single unit standard and qualifications, they always have credits. Now, there's a standard calculation that we use for credits. 1 credit equals to 10 notional hours. Now, on OBE, we know there's a theory and a practical component, and on theory, it could be classroom, it could be discussions, it could be homework that you got. Maybe the facilitator or the company said you must read stuff before you go to class. All that hours get added up, and that form part of your theory notional hours. And then after, because on OBE we learned there must be a practical component, so you must do some work outside the classroom. You're not allowed to do it in the classroom. You're supposed to leave, go to the workplace, go and practice, I don't know, whatever it is, how to work with this machine, or go and practice it in the workplace. Now that practical experience, that adds up to your practical components. And sometimes we ask the learners to write down in a logbook to prove how many hours they have. Now if I put this theory and the practical, these hours together, I should at least get to 10 notional hours. So if I have 3 credits of in a training program, that equals to 30 hours. So I should recommend it at least have 10 to 15 theoretical hours learning towards that, and maybe another 10 or 15 practical hours. If I add this theory and practical together, I must at least get to 30. So that calculates the duration or how much work is involved in the actual learning program.